Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Happy Wednesday. We are midway through the week, so I hope that you all are having a really wonderful week. I know this is also, if you're here in the States, the last week of the summer or leading up to the last week of the summer, so I hope that you all have had a really, really good summer. Today's conversation is going to be about tackling burnout and embracing self-care as a DEI change agent. We wanted to bring this conversation really to you all because in our work as DEI practitioners, we do recognize the heavy lift, the emotional weight, the emotional toll that really carrying out this work does. And we wanted to have a space where we could just breathe a little bit, talk about our own personal self-care well-being practices that will allow us to be able to show up for ourselves. In this work, we are constantly showing up for other people. We're showing up for underrepresented or historically excluded communities while also managing our own personal feelings of exclusion or oppression and just navigating the workplace overall. We also find that leaders within the talent space have a lot to handle in the day-to-day of the work and oftentimes need more resources and support that is actually given to carry out that work. And so we wanted to just have this conversation with y'all because we see you, we hear countless stories about how hard it is at this time. And let's be honest, y'all, society right now just feels like every day you look, there's something happening in the news where everything is on fire, right? And so this is a conversation for us to talk about what it means to truly center ourselves, to take care of ourselves as we are taking care of so many other people. All right, we invite you into this conversation. Ask questions in the chat. If something resonates, please let us know that. Also share what you have been doing as well along your self-care and your restorative journey. This is what this conversation is truly about. Okay, with that being said, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about our amazing panelists and also about Perfeqta. I'll start by introducing myself. I'll talk about Perfeqta, and then I will turn it over to our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. So if you are new to one of our Perfeqta webinars, welcome, and we're so happy to have you. Hope that you will be back, and this won't be the last time we'll be seeing your face. Perfeqta, we are a boutique talent development agency that helps companies build high-performing teams and put equity back into talent. Perfeqta is short for performance, equity, and talent. We are all about building high-performing cultures with an embedded focus on equity. We believe that no company is truly fully inclusive until the most marginalized or historically excluded person feels that they have a sense of belonging. And so we work with companies of all sizes in all industries, but one thing that is true to the companies that we work with is that they have a passion for this work. They recognize that the work is important, and they are on a mission to really truly embed equity and inclusion throughout their company culture. So I always like to say we work in the business of culture transformation. And again, we are very, very excited to be here with you all. So thanks for spending the next hour here. My name is Letitia Bird, and I will now pass it along to Liz.
Hey, Letitia, can you see me now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Hey, everyone. So nice to see you all again. For those who were in our last panel, my name is Liz Renee. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in the DMV area. I've been in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for about 10 plus years across various industries from big tech to education and now to consulting. So super excited to be with you all today and engaging in this conversation about how we can prevent burnout and really embrace self-care. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Amelia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amelia Avery Bradley, and I hail from the Dallas, Texas area. I have been in the DEI and social impact space for roughly about 14 years, collectively, worked in the for-profit and nonprofit sector. Definitely very excited to be part of this conversation. And yeah, just And let's see, what are we?
Thank you both. All right. So, what we're going to talk about for this next hour together is we're going to talk a little bit about the cause of burnout. What is actually causing burnout in your role? And how do you make self care a priority to protect your well being? We'll also talk about the importance of advocacy. We need support, we need resources, we need budget, we need visibility. I can go on and on and on about what we truly need as practitioners in this space to maintain progress. And then we also want to discuss how to make sure your impact on the company culture is seen, valued, and respected. Okay. Why are we talking about this again? I have a few stats that I want to share. Liz, I know you may have a couple of stats to share as well too. But 50% of HR professionals are on the verge of quitting due to burnout. That is half, y'all. And also 50% of managers reported feeling burnt out, which is higher than the general employee population. So if you are not only an HR professional, talent professional, if you are also leading others, right, that can also contribute to burnout. 60% of leaders report that they feel used up at the end of the workday. Y'all, we spend over 1/3 of our lives working. But to be quite honest, how many of us can fully shut our brains off, even if we've logged out, right? And it's time for us to be present with our loved ones, family, friends after work. How many of us are still going to sleep, thinking about work, dreaming about work, or just waking up and going straight into work mode? Even if we're working 8-9 hours a day, our brains are probably still working even beyond when our bodies physically are, right? And then 100% of the responsibility onto DEI employees and only DEI employees is unfair and ineffective, right? Something that we talked about, if you've attended our previous Perfeqta webinars, is that the responsibility of caring for DEI is a collective effort, but sometimes it may fall on a few individuals, but really this work should be spread out amongst and across the entire organization for it to have a holistic and sustainable impact. Does anyone relate to these stats that are being shared? And I'm looking in the chat. Does anyone relate to this? All right, I see some thumbs up. Seeing some yeses in the chat too. Liz, did you want to share any of the stats that you also found?
Yeah, I think just to give us potentially a silver lining, while this is definitely the reality for many of us, including myself, I can relate to the stats on the screen. Some potentially promising stats that I saw in a BBC article that I will drop in the chat when I get a chance is that 82% of business executives think diversity initiatives are critical to their business strategy. Only 2% of business leaders surveyed said that such initiatives were not important, but now it's a matter of putting your money where your mouth is. And then in this survey, nearly 2/3 of chief human resource officers expect to focus their efforts on attracting diverse employees. But now it's a question of how. Are you planning to do that without the support of a DEI team, with understaffed, with cut teams, etc.? So just wanted to give us a little bit of a silver lining while still honoring the reality of that many of us are facing in this industry.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Liz. So now we're going to shift to our panel discussion. And if you all have questions, I want you all to drop your questions in the chat, or let me see if the Q&A function is working. Just drop your questions in the chat. I have a few questions, but I want to open it up to you all. And so I want to start with Amelia, and then I'll circle to Liz. What do you all think is the root cause of burnout and exhaustion amongst DEI, HR, culture, talent professionals?
Oh, I think that the root cause starts with just the lack of support, right? And resources. I think that a lot of times we're working against the grain on things that we're doing. We face so much resistance in some of the workplaces. We're teaching, we're cultivating, we're sometimes counseling in certain scenarios. And so I think that um, being under-resourced, stretching ourselves so thin, and then also the acknowledgement of our own personal burdens in this space is a lot of where that burnout comes into place.
Thank you, Amelia.
Sure.
Liz, how about you?
Yeah, I feel like this burnout is coming from a lot of different things. And of course, I'll speak for myself as a Black woman and DEI practitioner. I think a part of what I'm grappling with is a sense of guilt. I think many of us were called to this work because of our passion, because of our personal experiences. And I constantly find myself asking, have I done enough? Is the intent of going into DEI as a profession aligning with the impact given some of the outcomes, not only of the industry itself and like what we're trying to strive towards, but also like how it's making me feel physically, mentally, emotionally. And so I think that's a part of what I've been grappling with and what I feel like is a part of the root cause. Also, coupled with negative headlines, I think right now it's really starting to weigh on me where it's like you're seeing what they're saying about DEI. And so being someone who's in one of those positions, you're constantly thinking like, is my job on the line? Or for those who are currently looking for a job, like, do I need to potentially like shift to different jobs, like to a whole different industry? What would the cost of that be? Does that require going back to school? Does that require taking on a job that's at a different level and that has less pay? And then I think Amelia touched on this perfectly. I think a lot of DEI teams are not set up for success. We're understaffed and have the weight of the world on our shoulders. We're expected to address centuries of systemic inequities in a matter of years. And when that hasn't been met, even though we try to level set and explain why that cannot necessarily be the case, they say that the work was pointless and on to the next. Whereas there's so many other industries and different roles in a company that require lots of time in order to build and in order to refine. And it seems like those other roles are given more grace and more understanding than DEI because it seems like they didn't even want us here to begin with. So it's like they're treating us like the stepchild, the stepchildren of the organization at times. And I feel like that's been my personal experience.
Whew. As y'all were talking, I was just like, I have so much to say because I feel like y'all really nailed it. I mean, what we're seeing in the news right now, DEI is under such a critical lens where, every day we wake up and there's, another company that's cutting back, right? There is another company that's completely removing DEI and calling it something else. And there's just a lot of shifts right now. And it is very, very demotivating when you keep seeing all these headlines about, is DEI work still necessary? And it's like, y'all, I thought we move past these conversations, right? It seems like we're going back. And, as well as the resistance.
Close your door so this won't be too loud.
We also, we also do get a lot of resistance in this work. What I do want to say, and Liz, I'm glad that you also shared some really positive headlines, is that there are companies still committed to the work. Yes, there might be a few companies here and there that we're seeing in the news, but that is not representative of the industry as a whole. I will say our clients at Perfeqta are still very, very committed. And we do have a couple of our clients on this webinar, so I want to just shout you out. Thanks for being here. But there are still companies committed to the work. I don't see DEI going anywhere at all. And what we're seeing in the media and in the news is showing just why this work is really important. So I have a question for
Pop
go
back
ahead,
really
Amelia.
quickly, Letitia, and say that also a part of this is making the intangible tangible. I think that a lot of times we are trying to, around data, around behaviors, around shifts, we are really working really hard to make the intangible tangible. And I don't want that to not be acknowledged in this conversation because I think it's really important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amelia. And so, Amelia, I want to turn it back to you. What does self-care look like for you in your personal life, and how do you prioritize it during the time when this work can feel mentally and emotionally heavy?
Oh, I cry, y'all. I do. I acknowledge every emotion that I'm feeling, right? I think that that's really important for my own well-being. I think that developing a vocabulary around how you're feeling and saying, you know what, I feel frustration, I feel sadness, I feel disappointment, or I feel joy, or I feel excitement, or I am really, just, maybe over the moon about something that's going on or something that's happening. I think that for me, as a part of my care routine, is first I acknowledge what I'm feeling and how I'm feeling. Secondary to that, meditation is an important practice for me. So I do kind of try to sit and ground myself and understand my commitment and my calling in what I'm doing, because I was really called to do this work. It wasn't just me showing up. It's a lot of things that I could be doing, but this is was really what I wanted to do, and um, being patient with myself. So I journal a lot. I sit and write and reflect and say, okay, what's happening? And I acknowledge the impact, even the small ones that I make. Because I think a lot of times we look on the macro level instead of looking at the micro. And so I look at, okay, who is the one person that was impacted by the thing that I said or the thing that I did? Right. Sometimes it's just one person, and that creates a ripple effect. So when I can anchor myself in those ways, I feel like that helps me to really continue to take care of myself. I don't do the news a lot. I'm really intentional about my social media feeds. I really sit in and I don't spend a whole lot of time on social unless I'm putting out specific content. Other than that, I'm listening to things that are infusing me with a level of positivity, right? I'm listening to, my personal, I like Abraham Hicks, right? Or I like, a lot of various podcasts or places where I can bring in information that's going to help elevate me and uplift me and keep my frequency at a certain level, as opposed to everything that's what's happening externally. Because change is constant and consistent. But I think that making sure that I am just infusing myself with love, giving myself patience, giving myself time. And I think that as a practitioner, that's what you should always be doing. If there's a moment when it's too tough, step away, take a break. Hopefully you have some time where you can say, you know what, I need a mental health moment. This might not be as important, right? There's nothing is going to fall apart. Like we're not we're not surgeons. Okay. So if I was in the ER, I'd be like, I'm working on a life here. I can't step away. But in the instance of in a corporate setting, as many of us are, you can take a moment and step away and take a break and say, I need to take care of myself right now. I might need to balance myself out. I might need to walk outside and get some fresh air and then come back to it with fresh eyes and fresh spirit. But
That was so good.
thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. Liz, what about you?
I feel like I don't always do a great, okay, I feel like I don't think I'm always doing a great job of implementing self-care strategies, especially as someone who avoids trauma by being busy and doing lots of things. But some of the things that I will say that I feel like I can give myself credit for is not settling. For someone who has been, in this job hunting journey for a DEI role, acknowledging what it is that I want and deserve and what I bring to the table. And even though it might take a little longer to find that right fit, it doesn't mean that I need to settle for just anything. And I'm still able to survive and thrive and do what I need to do to make ends meet while I wait for that. So I think that's one thing that I would say that I've been really proud of myself for doing. And then also, as someone who is always like the person who's like, hey, we got to fight for our rights in every single avenue. If there's a problematic rideshare driver, I'm going to call you out. If there's a nasty tweet, I'm going to respond. If there's like a clickbait post, I'm going to be in the comments. I've had to set boundaries around that. Like, I do not have to have this superhuman complex. Not every fight is something that I have to fight on my own. And I think this also ties into what Amelia was saying. Like, sometimes it's like the DEI person is the only one who has the tools to respond and address issues of inequity. But it's like, no, it's not my only responsibility. And I don't have to feel guilty if I decide to embrace self care by not engaging in those moments.
You know, y'all bring up such good points. And, you know, Liz, I feel like as a DEI practitioner, we always want to like call out all the systemic inequities that we see, because we do that every day, right, in our work, but we also see what that looks like, you know, personally, you know. For me with self-care, I'm very passionate about self-care, but I will say that self-care has become a bit performative. Like, it has been like okay, like, how much self-care can I do today? And it's just, that is counterproductive to what self-care actually should be, right? It's not about how many journal prompts can I knock out? How many affirmations can I write? How many minutes can I meditate? It almost seems to be, if we get too overly obsessive with the production behind it, we lose sight on what it really is there to do. And self-care is going to look different for everyone. You know, as someone who is a Capricorn, where my Capricorns at, earth signs at, I love a routine. I love routine. I love plans. And so self-care for me is actually having a solid morning routine. I do the same thing just about every morning, right? I do spend time journaling. I have a daily self-care journal that I love. I love taking my time, making my breakfast, my coffee, cuddling with my cat. Like, those are the simple things, right, that work for me. And even a night routine. And I will say, as I am getting older or wiser, I need a lot of sleep. So I'm in bed by like 9 o'clock, y'all. Like, that is just, I realize that I need more sleep. That helps me. But then also play is really important. And I read this one line, and it's something that I also kind of subscribe to, but life is so much more enjoyable when you always have something to look forward to. So that could be, and again, it doesn't have to be a big vacation. It could be a dinner with a friend. It could be scheduling time to catch up with a mentor, always having something to look forward to outside of work. And I have found that to also be really helpful, because it takes my mind off of, you know, the work, and forces me really to take my mind off of it. So I love that. What do y'all do for self-care? And I love all the Capricorns in here. What do y'all do for self-care? Drop it in the chat as well. Drop it in the chat what you all do for self-care. And again, like I said, I'm a Capricorn, so my self-care looks the same every day, every week. You know, for the other signs out there who maybe don't need the routine, right? I have also seen where you can have a self-care menu, right? Where you have a list of things that you can kind of choose from, and depending on how you're feeling that day, you know, it may look different. Maybe you don't journal every day. Maybe you journal one day and then you do something else the next, right? So it doesn't have to look the same. And I think that's also something that's really special about self-care, is that it's going to look different for everyone. So Liz, I have a question for you. What strategies have you found to be effective for managing stress at work to prevent burnout as a DEI change agent?
Yep. I'm seeing some strategies in the chat. I saw no meeting Fridays. One, that's something that I think is very important. And I think that just kind of goes under the theme of setting boundaries up front and honoring those boundaries, whether that means, which sounds wild to say this, but you know, I'm not going to work outside of the hours of 9 to 5. I'm not going to set meetings outside of the hours of 10 to 4, whatever that looks like for you. And I understand that this goes sometimes depending on your level, sometimes your tenure in an organization. These can be easier to implement or not, depending how junior or senior level you are. But those are things that now, based on where I am in my career, when I'm going into a job, I'm asking these questions up front. If I'm hearing certain words like phrases like, we need someone who can hit the ground running, and, you know, talking too much about working outside of hours, it's a no for me. As, you know, Amelia said, like, we're not surgeons. I can do my job extremely well within the dedicated time that I am set to work. And if I'm constantly having to work outside of those hours, that means it's a management issue or it's a process issue, and it's not my issue. So those are some of the things that I've definitely tried to implement. Another thing that I would say is identifying what a safe space looks like for you inside of the workplace or outside of the workplace. In the workplace, that might be your fellow colleagues within the DEI space, other DEI champions. It might be an employee resource group, just a space where you don't necessarily feel like you have to constantly be on. And for some of us, the reality is you may really feel like you don't have that space inside the workspace. So I would definitely make time to like re-energize, recharge, and do what you need to do to feel at peace outside of work as well. Yeah, and I think it's just important to know that like work is a part of you. It's not your sole identity. And honestly, I just think it's a good thing to have a life outside of work. Like, what can you turn to when you're off the clock? How are you spending your weekends? And yeah, those are some of the things that I do. So those are some of the strategies that I implement.
Thanks, Liz. Amelia, what about you?
I think that some of the strategies that I implement are really just looking at breaks and taking things slower, right? I just really have been in a place where I felt that I saw in the thread where someone was saying, you know, am I doing enough? And I was really struggling with that for a while. And I was like trying to push out every program and trying to do all the things. And I was like, this is not, it may not be that relevant in this moment, because am I really being of service to the work in the best way and to myself? So really just slowing down and taking time, much more time to be present on calls, to be present in my everyday life. I'm a mother, I am a wife, you know, I have a lot of balancing I have to do. And so even really taking time to acknowledge those roles in my work as well, because I think that, you know, sometimes I have later meetings, sometimes I have early calls. How does that relate to, you know, my family structure? Sometimes I'll just, you know, take some time with my daughter and say, let's just do a takeoff, a PTO day. You're getting a PTO day, and so am I, right? And so um, taking some time to enjoy my family, enjoy my life, be present in the world that I'm existing in is really important. And I like David said, dancing. I love dance. I love music. Music is literally like I have a soundtrack to my life. So really shifting my state, I will bring it. I love music from the 70s. So shifting my state around, you know, music is really important for me. So
I love how you're introducing PTO to your daughter.
if I yeah.
And you gotta tell us what song is in rotation for you right now. Like, what's one of your favorite
Oh
like self-care
my gosh.
songs?
Okay, so Cleo Soul is a big one.
Yes.
If you guys know, Cleo Soul is big for me right now. And then Songs in the Key of Life is in heavy rotation. Stevie Wonder is really big for me right now. Just because I feel like that's kind of in some Earth, Wind and Fire. So I
Yeah.
try to have a little mix of music genre in there. I like some Coldplay too. So I think that just having, you know, I have a record collection, y'all. I'm a music connoisseur. So I think it's important to, oh look, yeah, we have another Cleo solo. So bringing in those elements, sound is it shifts us in a lot of ways. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Love that. Y'all gotta drop the playlist in the chat. And Amelia, you gotta drop your playlist in our Slack. So we can get that.
We're gonna have a Perfecta playlist that's gonna come out, y'all.
Right, y'all just get on our newsletter so you can get that. No, I would love that too. I love music as well. And something else I want to bring up is energy management. I know a lot of us have heard time management, but energy management is also really important for me because I recognize I'm an empath, I'm a highly sensitive person. I get drained easily from conversations, especially if they're heavy, if they're tough, if they're emotionally, taxing. And so as you all are looking at your schedule and your time or what you are spending your energy doing, can you find time to recharge, right? If you know you're going to go into a meeting with a senior leader who is always questioning the work and always kind of pushing back on, your planning efforts, schedule time after that to step away, take a break, and also realize when your energy is kind of most high or low during the day, right? I'm a morning person. So I know sometimes my team will see me sending out messages and emails and reviewing work at like 6:30 in the morning sometimes, because I know you will get the worst of me if I do it at 3 or 4. There's gonna be typos in there. I sent Amelia a message in Slack yesterday. It's supposed to go to somebody else. It was like 4 o'clock. And again, I know I'm shut down by that time. And I was like, I'm sorry, my brain is all so frazzled. But I know early in the morning is when my brain is sharper. Some of you all might be a little bit more sharper in the evening or at night. So, find ways where you can like really pay attention to your energy and what works well for you. And yes, Beth, the social battery is very important. So, Liz, I have a question for you. What are the most effective ways? Sorry, I'm switching up the questions and panelists just because of the flow of the conversation. But what are the most effective ways to advocate for the necessary support and resources from senior leadership to sustain DEI efforts?
I feel like a part of this is staying vocal, but also finding the key moments where speaking up will have the greatest impact. So I think it's kind of like a trickle effect of, I guess, kind of balancing like, look, if you're always the person who cries wolf, people are going to start to tune you out and they're not going to want to listen. But also, if you just wait for the big meeting to say how you really feel, people might be like, where the heck did this come from? So I think there's an opportunity to kind of leverage allies in the work, leverage co-conspirators in the work to vocalize what it is that you're working on and to bring them in on the work. Because once again, what we've been saying is this work cannot be done just by people who have DEI in their title. It's the responsibility across all roles to really address these issues and to seek out change. So how can you leverage them in this work? How can you make your voice heard? And how can you maximize key moments in time in order to kind of like build that continuity? And so when the moment comes, people haven't heard it for the first time. People are not exhausted from hearing it from you all the time. And now you can really maximize on that moment. So I think that's one thing that I would implement.
Yeah, getting those co-conspirators for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Amelia, anything you would add?
No, Liz hit it on the head because I think it's really like building relationship, right? You're building relationship with different individuals to help you advocate for the work ahead of it. I think also aligning to business objectives, right? Aligning to business goals. I think that's an important one too. Understanding what's important to the business, what's important to leadership, and then helping to kind of find that marriage of that in the work that you're doing and what you're trying to bring forward. Because I think that what's challenging and what's relevant in a lot of settings is that this work serves a purpose in everything that we're doing in every business line, whether it's internal or it's external. And so when you can kind of show that to different areas of the business and bring that forward to leaders, it can really be powerful. But I think it's important, like Liz said, to create the allyship, like create the advocacy in your business. I work myself very sometimes very segmented and very siloed. And I'm like, oh, I'm plugging away at it. And I don't always ask for help or just tell people or just talk to them and say, hey, I need your advocacy on this. I need you to be in the room when I'm not. Right. And so that's really important.
So important. And Amelia, going back to you, how can you be mindful of your well-being during those discussions with senior leadership?
I think that you have to understand and remove expectation. Don't expect them to get it. Don't walk in with the expectation that they are going to understand or advocate or be on the same page as you. and give yourself enough grace to understand that you are delivering a message, you are bringing an awareness, and you don't necessarily have to, number one, shift their understanding in that one meeting. Because you are working against years and years, most likely, of a certain level of programming, right? And so you don't have to shift everything in that one moment. But if you find a spark within the individual that you're speaking to, lean into that and be more personable and be a little bit, for me, I found some safety in being vulnerable a little bit, right? And to a certain extent, but being more vulnerable about my passion and about my own experiences in relation to the work that I'm doing and helping to find those synergies. And I find that really, really important in navigating some of these conversations.
Love that. Thank you. Liz, I'm going to ask you a question, and then if y'all have questions, go ahead and start dropping your questions for our panelists in the chat, because we're going to open it up for questions from you all. So Liz, how can DEI change agents ensure their contributions to company culture are seen, valued, and respected by senior leadership, just by the company as a whole?
Yeah, I think this one is a key piece to support our, well-being, us feeling valued in the workplace, and then our longevity in the workplace. I feel like one of the things that ideally should be in place is systems levels change in a way where DEI is clearly connected or messaged within the company's business goals and strategies, where DEI is embedded in the performance review cycle, where there's a culture where DEI is celebrated continuously, whether that's highlighting the efforts regularly in staff meetings, whether there's an award ceremony where people are being elevated for their contributions. I feel like in an ideal workplace, it starts there because it protects the work. And regardless of what's happening in the news cycle, regardless of what's happening in the world, like it's just consistently thread through every aspect of the workplace. Now, I know this is not the reality for a lot of folks, and DEI practitioners are literally on the journey to create those systems. So when that's not the space, when that's not an option, I would say for DEI practitioners especially, is to remember that you are the expert in this work. I think a lot of the conditions that we're under right now can lead us to experience imposter syndrome, can lead us to question ourselves, can lead us to question whether this is the right career. And I know I said this in the last panel, but I definitely want to emphasize it, that we are the subject matter experts, and it's important to move forward with that level of confidence, because sometimes when you lose that confidence, it can show up in different ways in the workplace. It can show up physically in your posture. You want to zone out and give up, and then that kind of influences everything you do moving forward. So I would say continuing to move with that level of confidence. And then the last thing that I think is very difficult to do, especially as a Black woman, is I know we have been told to work twice as hard to expect half as much. But what does that look like when working twice as hard perpetuates white supremacy culture? And how can we as DEI leaders still move the work forward as we teach people about what it looks like to disrupt, but making sure that we are upholding the same values that we're literally teaching others to do? I think it's a really fine line. And some people might say that's a utopia that doesn't exist. But once again, it's something that I look for in leadership and management. I want someone who is willing to disrupt and do that fight where it's like, look, everybody else can be working under these toxic, toxic workplace culture, values, whatever. But what are we doing over here so we can lead by example? And if we have to perpetuate white supremacy culture to get DEI work done, what are we really doing? And so once again, I know there's the reality of our experiences versus like ideally how we should be able to operate. But I think together we can figure out what that looks like realistically. So those are some of the strategies that I try to implement.
That was a mic drop moment.
Right? I was like, ma'am, listen, I had to, yes.
Right. Amelia, did you want to add anything to what Liz said? Or like, what's your response to that?
Where? Is there one? I don't have one. There's
No,
nothing, I don't
just
have
gonna end
anything.
it.
Yeah, that was amazing, Liz. Like, thank you for that. Because
Yes.
I definitely, felt a little something in my spirit. I'm like, yes, that is amazing.
When we're doing equity work, we do have to be mindful of inequitable and unpaid labor that we are doing. And that is something that I really hold near to, my heart and always pay attention to when it does come to, the companies that we work with here at Perfecta. And luckily, all of our clients are amazing, but have we had to have conversations around scope creep? Have we had to have conversations around, hey, you're asking for this, we are paid for X? Like, I don't want to perpetuate a system that I am actively working against, right? And actively working to solve for. And so I just think that's so important because self-care, it's also a way for us to protect our own labor. So I love that you connected that back to the work that we do. That was so good. So now we're gonna open it up, y'all. Don't be shy. I know y'all got some questions. You can always just send them to me privately to keep it anonymous if that is what you are most comfortable with. And so we do have a question here. I'm curious to know, how do you all respond to pushback from leadership when attempting to implement DEI strategies? Perhaps a managing up conversation, particularly when senior leadership lacks both lived experience and also literary exposure. So really, really good question.
I'll take that one. That I think that number one, I try to understand what's important to them, what's driving them. And then I try to kind of embed my ideals and strategy within that place. I think that bringing them into a certain level of awareness around this is going to be an important strategy to help us execute on X for the business, right? Because most of the time, if they don't have a relation to what's important in their lived experiences, they have core tenets that are important to employee retention. They have some areas that are important to employee engagement, productivity, like a lot of other areas that may be happening within the organization that are important to them that I am going to sit in partnership with in helping to bring my strategy and what I'm trying to do forward, right? I'll give a quick example. Sometimes we have I've worked with HBCU programs, and certain people are like, oh, well, why aren't we having this program at every school? And why are we just targeting this specific, these specific students or these specific individuals? And I show them where there's inequity within our organization and then how we can build diverse thought, innovation in our organization. Who do we want to be? Because this is who our competitors are being. So who do we want to be as an organization, and bringing in talent that is going to help to up level us in a different way? Because I don't want it to look like, oh, well, these individuals just need this special treatment, or I'm an individual that needs this special treatment. No, I'm magic, right? So when I walk into a room or when I bring something to a setting, it's going to be up leveled significantly. But having the understanding of what's important to them is really core in that conversation that I'm walking into. And then sometimes I mitigate some of my expectations. They might be for it and they might not. They might like it and they might not. How do I keep progressing it? And is there another champion that may be on their same level that can help to navigate that conversation in association with me, right? So hopefully that's helpful.
I would love to add to that if that's okay. One thing that I also think about that hopefully can happen prior to these conversations where we're trying to implement new policies and implement new action is, how is leadership a part of your DEI learning and development strategy? Because sometimes what happens is the DEI workshops are opt-in. The DEI workshops are, for the junior level staff, or there's just one training that people do when they're onboarded and then you forget it. But how are leaders being embedded in this process and continuously having exposure to the education, whether that's the DEI professional leading those trainings or whether they're partnering with an external organization, I think it's a little bit of an exposure effect. So by the time you have this conversation about the different practices that you need to change, about the different policies, one, the leader has had exposure to some of the context. Like, for example, I feel like Amelia, what you were just describing, that's like equity versus equality. Why are we highlighting HBCUs? Equity versus equality, DEI 101. And hopefully that leader has been exposed to this kind of understanding and foundational learning. So when we're working together, it's not now me in this conversation having to upskill you and manage up and bring you up to speed on like foundational DEI principles. So wherever possible, I would definitely make sure that leaders are receiving that same ongoing training as everyone else in the organization. And ideally, everyone should be exposed to this level of training, and leaders should be thinking about it from a systems level as they progress in their learning journey.
Based on that, Liz, can I ask a follow-up question to you? Because yes, having a conversation around about what is the difference between equity and equality is not something that I think we should be having, but that does come up, right? And so say if an organization doesn't have a fully robust L&D program for leaders, say you are in conversation with someone, how do you respond to that? How do you approach that? Because everyone is on different kind of learning understandings, awareness of it, and honestly just buy-in, right? And so, how much of it is like, what, it is my responsibility to educate you to help me do this work better, or how much of it is like, what, just figure it out, right? Like, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because, like you said, depending on the organization, they just may not have had the opportunity to have a robust L&D strategy. And so this is what they're met with. I think if you are able to leverage, and I'm saying case studies, that sounds more academic than what I mean, but examples of similar initiatives in the workplace that were implemented, especially ones that were implemented without pushback, I feel like sometimes that can help in these conversations. And then I also feel like maybe the conversation is not a one and done. Maybe it's once again, like what I was kind of talking about earlier, maybe there have to be multiple parts to this conversation where you're introducing the new concept, you're coming back with your data and your examples of why we should do this. And of course, incorporating some of that DEI foundational explanation of the difference between equity and equality. Unfortunately, some businesses need to see that other businesses, especially their competitors, if their competitors are doing the work before them, sometimes that's what they need. And I guess depending on your organization, like what makes them start to take action. Sometimes, unfortunately, for some organizations, it's being out in the news in a negative light. And it's like, look, this happened last year. We're trying to avoid this. Sometimes for some organizations, it's seeing that their competitor is doing it first. Sometimes for some organizations, it's seeing that their favorite team that implements everything, that what you're doing looks similar to what that person is doing. Sometimes it's just about the language. So I would say those are some of the approaches. If you don't have that ideal scenario where the leader has been upskilled and engaging in ongoing DEI training with you.
Yeah, thank you for that, because it does sometimes feel like so much of the work is on us to educate, and we also are trying to create those programs, for everyone at the company. So I have a question for you, Amelia. What steps did you take to become a DEI expert, and when do you think one should feel confident identifying as such? The rest of the context here in this question is, been working in the field for a few years. Should I pursue additional education, present at conferences? Are there ways you continue to educate yourself and stay current in the field?
I think that in my journey, I felt confident as an expert when I was in practice, when I knew more outcomes to certain situations, right? So when I had been doing the work and really understanding the work, because I think that you can have a experience and like have knowledge, but until you've had the experience of either like being in it, seeing things firsthand, maneuvering in that space, that's where you develop confidence, right? So I think that there's components to being an expert, right? And a piece of that is and being and knowing being even the word title expert, right? Because I feel like I'm a continual learner, right? So I wouldn't even say that I'm like a DEI expert. I would say that I'm more of a practitioner of the work of the space because I'm continually growing and learning and evolving in a space that's doing the same thing. There are people that have been doing this 20 years, 30 years, behind me have been doing this work. And I'm continually learning from them. So I would say that if you're in the space, continue to learn and continue to grow. And you will know once you're at that point where and then put yourself in position, right? Start putting yourself out there to possibly speak more. I definitely find a lot of value in going to conferences and just building and learning from other people in my space, and understanding what they're doing and what I can be doing better and what best practices and what trends and what language and kind of all of these things. So I'm constantly curious. I'm always willing to accept and take feedback. That's one thing that Letitia and I have talked about because I was like, I really love feedback because sometimes I don't know where I have a gap. And so being open to that, books, there are a amazing amount of books and education that are available for you to grow in your practice. So knowing that this is an evolving space, that it's not something that you're like, okay, I have everything that I need and I don't need anything else. I think that as you continue to build yourself up, you will continue to gain more confidence in the space to project yourself out into the world. But start doing it, right? I'm big on just start saying it, start doing it, and get that receptivity of where you wanna be next.
And Letitia, I know you had like one more question you were going to squeeze in. I also just want to be mindful of sometimes people in positions of power will try to undersell your skill set by saying you're not an expert and saying, well, you needed to do X, Y, and Z in order to be considered an expert in this industry. And I think that's what a lot of DEI practitioners are falling into because for the longest, there wasn't necessarily a clear pathway into DEI. A lot of us fell into this work because we had a passion, because we had experiences of inequity, and now we're doing the work, right? And so, like, not everything has to be because I have a certificate. Not everything has to be because I have a certain degree. But yes, there has to definitely be a certain level of apprenticeship, learning from other experts. So, my final recommendation to you, the person who asked that question, would be to talk to other DEI practitioners about their journey. And you may actually be relieved to learn that their journey into DEI may be very similar to you and it's not as narrow. It looks so different from others. And I love the conversation in the chat. Like, we don't necessarily walk around saying we're experts in the work, but facilitators, practitioners, and ongoing learners.
Yes. Thank y'all both. And I'm just going to drop this question to you all in the chat as well. What resources are you all, doing to grow in, this field? Whether that is books, what books are you reading? What conferences are you attending? Are you leaning on community, talking to other practitioners? I would just love to understand what you all do to really grow and nurture your own expertise. So Liz, this will be the last question because we only have 3 minutes left. And if we don't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to us. We definitely we'll drop our contact information in the chat and would love to continue this conversation with you all, even beyond this hour. But Liz, this question is, how do you advise other consultants that are external to an organization to better support ERG leads and DEI advisors who are not in the boardroom to better advocate for the work? And that's a great question. I could write a whole essay on that because we do that a lot at Perfeqta. But Liz, I would just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's such a big question that I'm like trying to figure out where to start in answering that. I feel like one, I would recommend to every DEI practitioner, if possible, to consider a coach in the work, whether that's a network like shameless plug Perfeqta, or whether that's a one-on-one coach, career coach, someone who you can kind of like talk to about different problems of practice, different things that you're experiencing, very specific situations that you're working through within the organization, and getting their input. I guess I keep pushing this collaborative lens where like you as an individual don't have to have the answers to all of the questions, and who within your network can you connect with, because I'm sure that someone has gone through what you're trying to address before. So instead of reinventing the wheel as it pertains to the issue you're looking to address, how can you go to other people to figure out how they've addressed it and tweak that solution based on the industry that you're working in and based on the team that you're working with? So that's just a little tip of the iceberg, but would love to hear your thoughts if there's time.
Amelia, did you want to add anything to that?
No, Liz did an amazing job. There was someone, I do want to say there was someone that had an ERG question, and I would love for that person to reach out to us
Yes.
afterwards. Yeah.
And I will drop my email in the chat and also LinkedIn as well too. Shout out to everybody who joined today. I feel like we could have continued these conversations, and I want to go ahead and close this out here by letting you all know that we have a ton of resources here at Perfeqta. I'm also going to drop this in the chat. If you go on our website, go to our resources page, we have a few different resource guides, the Culture Playbook, an executive's guide to inclusive leadership. We also have a DEI framework. We also have a quiz you all can take. It only takes 10-15 minutes to be able to get an assessment of your company's DEI maturity. But also we have over 12 hours of webinars like this one today on how to support you in this work. Give it up for our panelists as well. Please connect with us on LinkedIn. And we're also accepting clients. So if you're looking to, really expand and evolve your DEI efforts in your organization, we are accepting new clients for Q4, really mostly leaning into Q1 now. So please get in touch with us. Let's keep the conversation going. The ERG question, contact us so we can get back to you. And I really just want to shout out Liz and Amelia. Thank you all so much for your time, your energy, all of the words that you shared today. I know I learned a lot, and I think that everyone else here did as well. So thank you. And if you're on the email list, we'll send out a recording. So please be on the lookout for that in the next couple of days. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody.